Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to start a new series called What's in My Collection. So this will be episode 1. Basically I just take 3 random records from my vinyl collection and discuss them. Talk about kind of the condition of them, the packaging, maybe where I bought them if I can remember, and just generally go over my thoughts on the album itself, as in the music, the writing, and the history of it and kind of the significance that it had on the music world and culture in general. So let's dive into it. All right, so the first album that's on the list here is Elton John's self-titled album. This was released in April of 1970, and it was recorded at Trident Studios in London, the legendary studio. The Beatles recorded there as well. I think they did like Hey Jude there, if I recall correctly. But yeah, legendary studio in London. In terms of the packaging, quite plain. Very stark album cover here. It's, just picture of Elton there. And then on the back, we've got all the band members at the time with all their names. Again, very plain, very kind of basic, a little bit boring in my opinion, actually. But this is a gatefold, so opens up into this kind of interesting font here. I don't know, it's like kind of like a burgundy, maroon-ish color, but it's got all the lyrics and all the song titles listed here as well. So having a look at the condition of the record itself. So we've got the UNI logo here, kind of the rainbow label. And this record is in really good condition. It's got very minor scuffs and scratches. And this, it's just in great shape. And this is a first pressing. I typically like to look for first pressings of albums, or at least earlier pressings. I just tend to like the sound quality a little bit better. And records back then, depending on when the record was originally released, of course, but records often had in like the 60s, 70s, early 70s, once you got into like the mid-late 70s, they started to make the vinyl itself actually a little bit thinner and a little flimsier. This you can kind of almost tell by the feel of it. This is a heavier vinyl, and a lot of the newer pressings or reissue pressings of older records like that came out in like the mid 70s and into the 80s are actually pressed on thicker, like 180 gram vinyl. So they kind of brought that back a little bit. But that's important because when you're playing it on a turntable, the number one enemy of playing vinyl is vibrations. Can cause some weird issues and a little bit of feedback, and it just doesn't generally sound quite as good. So when you have a thicker record, if the vinyl itself is actually thicker, it damps those vibrations just a little bit better. So that's the record. This one's in great shape. I believe I got this at a local flea market. There's a guy that I really like going to that has usually a really good selection, good prices, just good all-around condition for the records. And I really enjoy what he has for sale. So I don't remember what I paid for this, but it was a pretty good price. In terms of the actual music itself, this album is pretty sparse in its arrangements. It's mainly just Elton's vocals. There's a little bit of guitar here and there, a little bit of drums here and there, but it's really just Elton and the piano. A lot of string arrangements on this. Really, really nice string arrangements, in my opinion. A lot of these songs are a little bit sparse, like I said. The general production is just fairly straightforward. There's nothing fancy going on. A lot of his earlier stuff before he really got propelled into being like a superstar was definitely just more basic, much less instrumentation, The production was much more subdued. But I do enjoy this record a lot. It does sound nice. It's well recorded. Yeah, it's just kind of a pleasant album to listen to. A little slower, a little softer. There's some more upbeat songs on this, but definitely a more subdued record from Elton John. So let's look at the next one. All right, so next album, very different. We've got Rush, Moving Pictures. This was released in 1981, and it was recorded at Les Studios in Canada. Rush is a Canadian band, so that makes sense. And again, with kind of the packaging, this one happens to not be a gatefold, but fairly basic. We've just got a picture here, and just the band's name and the album cover on a black background. But obviously, the picture with a play on words, literally moving pictures, paintings. And then kind of more of the same in the back. This looks like, might have been like a behind the scenes shot of when that picture was taken. And then you've got the track list here. And that's about it. So, pretty basic, cover again. And in terms of the condition of the vinyl, so, well, first let's take a look at this inner sleeve. This is kind of a bit more interesting. You've got pictures of the band. You've got Geddy Lee, Neil Peart, and Alex Lifeson there. Pretty neat pictures. But you've also got a list here of, this is kind of just all like credits and stuff. And then you've got a list on the other side of the track names and all of the lyrics as well. That's one thing about vinyl. There's a lot of either it's on the cover itself or it's on the inner sleeve. You just get lyrics for everything. You don't really get that now. So, but the vinyl itself, this is also in quite good shape. There's a little bit of surface scuffing here and there, but actually play testing this record, it's in good shape. You can't really hear any of those visual defects. But yeah, this is the Mercury label. This was kind of custom Rush label, but this is also a 81 pressing, so might not be a very first pressing, but it is close. It is early. Yeah, you can tell actually if I pull up the outer sleeve again. There's no barcode on this, so you can tell it's a very early pressing because right around in the early 80s is when they started putting barcodes on records. So because this was released in 81 and doesn't have a barcode, it's definitely an earlier pressing. So yeah, in terms of the music on this, obviously very, very, very different from the Elton John record that we previously talked about. It's Rush. What can you say? Canadian rock trio, one of the best drummers of all time. And honestly, really great. Geddy Lee's one of my favorite bass players. Alex Lifeson, I feel like is a really underrated guitar player. Maybe he's not totally underrated, but I think he's underrated. Just because he's overshadowed by really great, instrumentation on this record. Lyrics are, they're okay. Rush has never really been known for their lyrics. It's really all about their playing, but obviously it's got Tom Sawyer on there, one of their biggest hits. Just a really, really great, powerful, hard-hitting song. And yeah, I really also enjoy YYZ on this as well. It's like an instrumental track, but there's some really cool things. Geddy Lee does some cool things with his bass. He does harmonics, which is quite uncommon on the bass. You've got kind of different guitar solos and drum solos, all great. I mean, this is obviously, it's very upbeat, very interesting. What I love about Rush, one of my favorite things about Rush in general, not just this album, is they have a lot of very interesting chord progressions, stuff that you wouldn't really think about otherwise. You don't really see a lot in other artists, other bands, but really, really neat instrumentation. Musically, a very interesting band. So yeah, that's it for this. One of my favorite Rush albums. Definitely a classic album. But let's move on to the last one today. All right. So the last album we're going to talk about today is Simon & Garfunkel, Sounds of Silence. This was released in early 1966. I believe it was January of 66. And this was recorded at Columbia's 7th Avenue studio in New York City. This is kind of a very classic 60s record. Simon & Garfunkel, actually in the last few years, has become one of my top artists. I really enjoy their stuff. Again, very different from the previous album. This is folk stuff, singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar, but just really great writing, of course. One of the best songwriting duos in history, in Paul Simon and Art Garfunkel. So we've just got, as is fairly characteristic of these like mid-60s records, you've got all of the track listing right at the top here. Just artist name, album name, pretty basic. Again, kind of like the Rush album, and just a picture of Simon & Garfunkel in the background walking down this dirt road here. On the back, a bit more interesting. You get a couple extra pictures here of the group, and you also get the song tracks here. And what's interesting about this one is it starts listing the lyrics, and then it kind of does, like a fade out, in a text form. It's like ... So that's kind of interesting. This is also fairly characteristic art style of the back of an album in the mid 60s or so. So this is a stereo pressing. Let's look at, first the condition of this. This actually has the original shrink wrap on it, which is really cool. The condition of this record, so this is, again, an early pressing. Like I said, I like to look for those. But this one is in fantastic shape. Hardly any surface wear, scuffs, scratches, nothing like that. A little bit of scuffing on the label. Columbia 2i label, so it's got two of these logos here, which was characteristic of this era of Columbia Records. And yeah, just a basic red stereo Columbia label. So really good condition on the vinyl itself. And I do want to point out here something that I kind of like to mention when talking about the condition of records. It is possible to have a album that doesn't actually have a lot of scratches and scuffs. Like visually, it can look quite nice. What is going on here? There we go. So visually, it can actually look really nice, but if it's played a lot and just taken care of, you can actually see, you can hear that it's definitely degraded. As I mentioned in a previous vinyl video, the more you play a vinyl record, the worse it sounds because the more it wears away. Generally, the high end goes first, and then everything else kind of follows from there. So it is possible to have a record that visually looks in excellent condition, but actually is just a very well played album, but very well taken care of. So it doesn't actually have any scratches, scuffs like that, but if you actually play it, then it might not sound the best, which is why, it's really hard to do before you buy a record. A lot of times you can't, but if you can find one that's play tested, or you can actually play test one yourself before purchasing the record, I would highly recommend that, because it's definitely hard to judge until you actually hear it for yourself. So the music on this album, It's classic Simon and Garfunkel. The recording quality is great. It's very characteristic of like a mid-60s album in terms of the sound quality. A lot of reverb on the vocals, a lot of space on the drums and the instruments. Back in the mid-60s, generally they were using more minimal miking techniques. So you'd only have, sometimes maybe only 2 mics on the drum kit, maybe up to 3 or 4. But generally in this era, you had fewer tracks to work with. So instrumentation, you're not going to get as many, individual micings of, guitars and especially individual drums and stuff like that. And you're going to get fewer overdubs. So a lot of it's going to be recorded live. More of it's going to be recorded live than overdubbed. They still did overdubs in the 60s for sure, but less characteristic the further back you go. But yeah, great sense of space on this album in terms of the recording quality. And the songs themselves, really, really nice. Sound of Silence is a classic. And I really like, Leaves That Are Green is a great song. Obviously, you get the classic Simon and Garfunkel 2-part harmonies. That's featured in pretty much every single record of theirs. And then, you get some other songs that are maybe a little bit less known. April Come She Will is just such a gorgeous song. And again, just the way that they write lyrics and it kind of paints a picture. You can really see visually, they're it's kind of like writing a book in that sense, where the author will use a bunch of words and descriptors to paint a picture in your mind, and that's kind of what they're doing here with the lyrics on a lot of their songs. So yeah, highly recommend. Really great listen. And that concludes this first episode of What's in My Collection. Hope you guys liked it. I'm going to continue with this series. Probably release about once a month a new episode of this. And if you guys have any comments or questions about the series, anything you want me to add, let me know, and I'll definitely try to add those into the next episode or future episodes. So thanks very much. Please like and subscribe, and I will catch you next week.